I look at myself. How often do we forget that there's God around? We don't attribute anything to him anymore, right? That's a problem. We forget about him. Sometimes we know about God, hopefully when we're praying and maybe when we're studying, but a lot of times we just forget. If we knew, we understood, we realized his presence, we would behave a lot differently all the time, right? Speaking about myself, someone who's very distracted, especially with other things, I get the most distracted here in the base medrash. If we only understood God's presence in this world, we would behave so much differently. So we forget about him all the time. That applies on the personal level and on the national level. Why? Because it's all from God. He controls our history. He's guiding us. He's guarding us. And sometimes we forget that. I think that this is a disease that even happens to the most learned among us and the most pious. What's that joke? They say as someone who's so busy, I don't have no time to connect with God because I'm too busy, davening and doing all my mitzvahs and studying. Who has time for God? Right? It's kind of true. And that also happens on historical point. There's Jewish leadership that sometimes forgets that God's in charge. And I think that this was a blindness among, even, I'm not the first one to say this, blindness among leaders of our people who didn't see good. Last week we talked about how there are those who were so stuck in the galut, in the exile, that they felt that nothing good could happen to Am Yisrael on a historical national level unless it was preceded by the coming of the Messiah. Until the Messiah shows up, good things cannot happen. We said who were the biggest expositors of this idea were at the time. This is also saying that Rabbi Soloveitchik made his mark. He lived in the time before World War II and before the Holocaust, where there was a tradition anti-Zionism. None of this whole selling land of Israel business. We're not so big advocates for it in a political sense, even though he had visited Eretz Yisrael in the 1930s. He had been, like I said, a candidate for the rabbinate there in Jaffa. But his family was traditionally not exactly Mizrahi. And then, with the Holocaust, he suddenly had a major change of heart. He became the biggest exponent of the Mizrahi point of view in the Western world and Eretz Yisrael. You're familiar with Rabbi Soloveitchik's teachings and his Yom Ha'atzmaut Shiurim. There's a lot of literature about this. Why? Because he realized the mistake. That was a mistake. We were caught totally blindsided by this. We just didn't get it, that what God wanted of us. And you could read Ema B'nu Smecha, Rav Teichtal, a victim of the Holocaust, who was basically involved in Hungarian anti-Zionism, good from Hungarian anti-Zionism, Satmar land, and who realized the grave error of what they're doing shortly before his own murder. Okay, so that's where they were. So the problem is Hanukkah teaches that we should attribute this to God. You could say a miraculous victory. Remember, Hanukkah happened in these times. That is post-prophetic. There are no prophets around. There was a great victory, and they did what they did. The question was, what do we do now? Is this from God or not? And they properly attributed it to God. This problem of attribution, like saying, no, the God is not involved. This isn't something holy, is something that persists to this day. I'll read you something that I got from Rabbi Daniel Eidenson. He should be well. He's the one who put together the indices in English and Hebrew for the Igros Moshe and the Mishnah Berurah. You've seen it? I forget what it's called, the Yad Moshe or the Yad Yisrael. So you could find them. A lot of Batei Medrash have them. This base Medrash happens not to have it, but I think it's a necessary thing. Okay, it's the index to the Mishnah Berurah. It's put together by Rabbi Eidenson, who's in Har Nof, and he used to just put out information online. I've seen this in a few places, but he's talking here about the 6-Day War. When the 6-Day War happened, it was a great miracle, and the subsequent November, December, the Agudas Yisrael had its convention in the New York area. It's usually Thanksgiving weekend or Christmas weekend. There's a tshuva about that from Rav Moshe Feinstein. The Aguda, why is it picked that weekend? It's their holiday. It's not anything. Yeah, but it's easy. They could get a hotel, and it's a legal holiday, so that's the best time to do it. And they always do it one of those weekends. So either in end of November, end of December, and that was the topic that they were discussing: how the rabbis are going to relate to the miracle of the 6-Day War. So he says that the Satmar rabbis claim the 6-Day War victory was Ma'aseh Satan, okay, and good miracles only happen to from people. And this is Ma'aseh Satan. It's a trick from the Yetzer Hara himself. By the way, I've met the Satan. He doesn't. I don't think he has such great powers. I was there in a few years ago in New York when Rabbi Shar Yosef Cohen was there, Rabbi Lau was there, Rav Tendler was there, Rav Schechter was there. Rav Schechter saying that these types of things are Maisa Satan and not Maisa God. That's Avodah Zarah. Everything is God. Attributing things to some sort of Satan. This is almost a Christian idea that the Satan has powers. The Satan is just an angel whose job is to prosecute. He has no powers. He's not some sort of competing force with God who can do such great things and trick us. The Satan is not a trickster. He's only a trickster in the fact that he tries to get you and me to do the wrong thing. And then he, on Rosh Hashanah, has a chance to say, oh, look at that. Grossman's not doing what he was supposed to do on Rosh Hashanah. But other than that, he's powerless. Okay? And he's also the angel of death. So that's what they were saying. And this was the basis of dispute. And I'll read you what Rabbi Eidenson wrote. He wrote this in the name, by the way, of a fellow Beer who was there. Rabbi Beer was there at the time. So they had survived. And there was also pessimistic views there about what to do. And at the Aguda convention, speaker after speaker spoke on the topic, and the Gedolim were clearly divided whether to agree or disagree with the Satmar position. One of those who publicly agreed with the Satmar view was Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. Okay, this is in 1967. At the Malav Malkin weekend, the keynote speaker was Rav Itchi Meir Levin, the Ger Rebbe's son-in-law. He, of course, spoke about the topic. After some introductory comments, he made the following observation. Listen carefully. This is the Ikar. Not so long ago, the Jewish people suffered the horrible loss of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. When we went to the Gedolim for an explanation, we were told that we must be silent and accept this because it was God's will. Holocaust, it's God's will. Accept it. Baruch Dayan Emes means you bless God for the good and for the bad. Now we were just faced with another possible Holocaust in the land of Israel, but the Jews were saved this time. We hear Gedolim who say that these millions who were saved by Satan. Okay? And they write Satan over here. How is it that when it comes to the death of Jews is God's work? When it comes to rescuing them from death, it is Satan. It can't be. Very good. That's explains why Rav Schechter said it. Saying attributing the good to the Satan. Bad, oy gewalt, yes, we deserved it. Something good happens, you can't accept good from God. And in response, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky quickly wrote a note which he sent to be read from the podium. It said, I want to publicly retract my previous statement supporting the view of the Satmar Rebbe and say that now I agree fully with what Rabbi Levin just stated. I have no doubt that this was a problem also in Hanukkah times. By the way, we see that also Mordechai and what he was trying to do. Read the Gemaras there, read the Megillah. Mordechai and Esther advocating for the establishment of a new holiday was something that was controversial among Jews back then. It wasn't something that was unanimous. And that is what we as Jews have to do. We have to recognize that when good things happen, it is only God who has done it for us. Al Anisim, you have to pray. And by the way, this is saying that so you see the conclusion at the Aguda convention 1967 was, so this is a good thing. Thank God for this. They did not go far enough. My own personal opinion. Okay, this is just Grossman talking now. When you have Hanukkah, so we say Hallel every day, right? If something big happens like this, you can't just say, thank you, God, it's good. You are obligated to establish a holiday for the generations. You know why? I remember telling this to Rabbi Parnas. You should also be well. He's in his 90s now. I asked him about the 6-day war. What was the experience? What was it like? Oh, it's terrible fasting, big Yeshua. Men in the 60s, great men in the 60s and scholars reacted properly. They recognized this was God's work. But because they did not establish a holiday, or to them, at least they don't teach us as a holiday where you have to thank God the way that Jews normally thank God, then they raised a new generation that totally doesn't know about this, or even worse, repudiates this. They own nothing. This was the situation as it was when I was in yeshiva, where the modern day miraculous events of Jewish history were basically ignored. That's what they were hoping to do, just ignore it. Okay, the 6-day war is good because the Mir wasn't destroyed. What about the rest of Yerushalayim? Okay, but there was no Hallel, no traditional Jewish observance, and that was a problem. Why? Because then you have hostile guys in the base medrash, type of people with whom I used to have to study. Thank God I'm in Eretz Yisrael now. I don't have to be among them. But their, I guess, heretical view was, that's for Tzionim and things like that. We don't do that. You're supposed to thank God for these things. Hanukkah teaches us that when these great miracles happen to the Jewish people, we are supposed to establish a holiday thanking God. Establishing a holiday means a day to say the Hallel. Really, like Rabbi Rabinovich told me, if there had been a Navi, they would have made a new song. They would have written something new, and that would have been the Hallel. That would have been the song. Just like Megillas Esther is like a Hallel specific for Purim. It fits Hallel better than Hallel Mitzri. But because they didn't have a prophet, they used the fallback, the default Hallel, which they do. Perhaps there should have been something written for Tekuvat Yisrael in the 6-Day War. And I hope that great miracles happen for us in the future. But the most important aspect that we forget about this is that we acknowledge that God is the one who does it in history, and we have to know when good things happen, we thank God for that. And that lesson is lost on anybody. I do not know how people celebrate Hanukkah, and they don't celebrate what's called Yom Ha'atzmaut. Hanukkah, the Atzmaut wore off after a while, but here we're still enjoying it. It's almost a kal v'chomer. How can you celebrate Hanukkah without celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut? Makes no sense. How can you celebrate Purim and the survival of the Jewish people and not celebrate Yom Yerushalayim? My nafkamina. There is no nafkamina from a historical standpoint. Say, oh, that was that in the olden days, that was God. Today it's not God. What is the difference? And there is no nafkamina difference. You say back then they used to wear robes, and today we wear suits and ties. That's not nafkamina. Someone told me the Maccabees could do what they did because the temple is still standing. So you're telling me that had the Greeks or the Hellenists, whatever it was, the rabbi talked about, the Jewish Civil War, had they gone and knocked down the temple edifice while we were gone during those years when they're not offering sacrifice in the temple, had the bad guys, and I say that only because it's kind of weird, who are we talking about? Greeks. It wasn't even the Greeks in Greece. It was Hellenized Gentiles from the surrounding lands and Hellenized Jews. So if whoever they were, the Sonei Yisrael, those haters of Israel, had knocked down the temple edifice, then suddenly a new halachic mechanism would have kicked in, prohibiting Yehuda Maccabee and his brothers from entering the temple complex because now the temple's in a state of destruction, so they can't do anything to fix it. You say that was them, now is now. What's the nafkamina? They had a prophet leading them. They had no such thing. They had kohanim. They had no such thing. They were pure. No such thing. What was the difference? Matter of fact, we were in a better situation. At least we have kalim around. They didn't have the kalim. We do. We have an altar ready to go. They didn't. So I'm a little bit confused about this. This gets me excited because now I see that you guys are young. When I was your age, no one was talking about this. This is not a topic for Jewish. This hasn't been a topic for Jewish discussion, and we're only beginning to wake up now to the great effects and the situation in which we are. We can still fix things. It's not too late, and I hope the window stays open.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.